Hi and welcome back to another video. I'm actually here in the UK visiting family at the moment. That's why you haven't seen a lot of videos from me. But as the US-China trade talks were going on in the UK, I thought I'd just like to make a video about it and my observations. Now, a few weeks ago, there was a sort of framework of a deal agreed in Geneva, and very shortly after that, the respective countries went back home, and America imposed some additional restrictions on the shipment of materials for the manufacture of semiconductors, and China viewed this as a breach of the sort of framework they'd come to in Geneva, and they stopped exporting, or they stopped granting licenses to export some of the rare earths. Now, if you don't know, rare earths are not actually that rare. There's plenty of them, but the problem is with the refining and processing of them. Now, China controls probably about 90% of the processing and refining of rare earth materials in the world, so they're the major exporter of these, and these rare earths and rare magnets are very critical to a lot of things, especially in the electronics industry and the military industry. So the US have been getting very concerned that they have not been receiving some of these shipments they should be from China of these rare earth materials. Now, in my mind, this is actually one of China's trump cards, and they are obviously using it as a bargaining chip. Now, at the Geneva one, they'd agreed that they would ease restrictions a little bit and grant licenses, but then a few days after the Geneva, the US side imposed these additional sanctions on semiconductor equipment. They also put out a note suggesting that countries around the world should be wary of using Huawei semiconductors in AI, and that's really trying to persuade countries not to use Chinese products, which again, I can understand why the Chinese are upset about that. Interestingly, the Kevin Hegseth, or is it Keith Hegseth? I think it's Kevin Hegseth, the military guy in the US, has recently come out and said that America are preparing for a war in the Pacific with China, and the US all the time they're ratcheting up the rhetoric towards China, and this is why China put a sort of licensing thing on the rare earths, and this is starting to affect a lot of operations in the US, and that's why the US are very, very eager to get a deal so that they can still keep receiving these rare earths. However, China are not that naive to think that they're going to give these rare earths supplied to the US for nothing in return. Now, America have sanctioned a lot of not only AI chips. We see the Nvidia H20 has now been blocked from being sold to China. Nvidia are developing a new chip to overcome those restrictions, but it's Nvidia are losing like billions and billions and billions of dollars. In an earnings call, they said they need to write off 5.5 billion. But I think the bigger picture is that these companies will lose the Chinese market, and the Chinese market is the biggest in the world. So at these UK talks anyway, interestingly, Howard Lutnick was invited to this round of talks, which really suggests that the semiconductor business is on the table as a negotiation to get the rare earths back, because China want access to semiconductor manufacturing materials, America want access to rare earths. So they really have to find some middle ground, but I think that's proving very, very difficult to do because neither side are prepared to give up. But anyway, they came to London. They met over 2 days. So far there's been no sort of big announcements out of that. They've both said that talks went well, they were candid, they were they were constructive. So really remains to see what comes out of it. They've both said they need to go back and discuss it with their leaders. I think that's not necessarily true. It may be true in the America's side, but I'm pretty sure Xi Jinping doesn't make the sole decision. He will consult with members of his cabinet and academics to see which way is best to go. I hope China don't capitulate on the rare earths and get very little in return, but it's always a switch that can be switched back on. If America this time after these talks go back to the US and then within a few days launch some additional sanctions against Chinese tech, then just as quickly China can slow down on those licenses for rare earths. And I think China are in a stronger position because I think it's easier for China to get hold of the things that America has blocked. And not only that, they're actually developing their own industry very, very quickly. You had Ren Zhengfei of Huawei suggesting that Huawei are now only one generation behind the US in chip technology, and they're finding a lot of workarounds. They're doing using packaging of semiconductors, using chiplets. They've just brought out their Cloud Matrix 384, which links 384 GPUs, the Ascend chips that Huawei create, and they use an optical interconnect on that, which makes it very, very fast indeed. Okay, there's some people saying, well, it uses more power than the equivalent US. Well, that may be the case, but honestly, I don't think China are that bothered that it uses a bit more power. China has a lot of power generation. They generate a huge amount of clean energy, especially in the northern parts of China, Gansu, Xinjiang, where they put in a lot of the data centers because power is so abundantly cheap there. They have huge solar and wind farms in that area of the country. I don't think power's such an issue here. Now, changing gears a little bit, interestingly, these sort of general tariffs, that the 30% that I think is still on from both sides, were not really discussed that much. This is turning into more of a tech war than an actual trade war. So I'm sure, Trump set this truce of 90 days. Now, he set that because obviously if he'd have kept those high tariffs on of 100+%, it would have been the US that would have suffered far more, because they're very, very reliant on Chinese manufacturing, where China are less reliant on America. China buy mainly agricultural goods from the US, and they're really not as dependent on those imports as America are on Chinese imports. We had the Chinese trade data out a couple of days ago. Yes, their exports had fell to the US, but they'd increased to other parts of the world. Okay, fair enough. Yes, of course, having these tariffs and this trade war will hurt China's economy. Of course it will. But China have planned for this for a long time, and I can tell you it will be hurting the US more than it will China. I think we will start to see that. You have Trump, he's boasting about the economics in the US. I mean, the US seem to judge everything on how well the stock market does, and they suggest that China's stock market is not doing so well, so that's a signal that Chinese economy is not doing well. But you got to understand that the Chinese stock market is not tied to the Chinese economy in the same way as that the American stock market is tied to the American economy. But yeah, I mean, it will be hurting China, but we've seen China pick up exports to other parts of the world. They still have a huge trade surplus with other countries, and they are continuing, the trade that they do with other Southeast Asian countries and African countries continuing to grow. Within a year and a half, 2 years, they will have made up any lost trade to the US. I suspect, I think that the thing here is that China, to do business in China is very, very stable. Businesses know where they are. Well, right now in the US, doing business is a bit chaotic. You don't know from 1 week to the next what tariffs you're going to have, what sanctions you're going to have. And I think this is causing a lot of concern to American businesses. They don't know when to purchase their goods. They don't know where to purchase it from. I think the American Chamber of Commerce did a survey here in China, and very few American businesses suggested that they were going to be moving their supply chains from China. China have, you know, supply chain clusters where there's certain parts of the country they make things. For example, Shantou in Guangdong province makes toys. I've actually done a couple of videos about that on my main channel, and they have all the suppliers in that area for plastic toy parts, everything to do with plastic toys. Whereas, you know, that takes decades to build. You know, if Trump wants to bring manufacturing back to the US, that's all well and good, but you can't do it at the flick of a switch. You know, you have to spend years and years developing those supply chains, and that's exactly what China have done. So it's not as easy. So anyway, you know, they've had these talks. They've now left the talks. They'll go back home and we'll see what develops. But, you know, this 90 days truce that Trump put in place, you know, that's ticking away, so they need to work fast. But I'm pretty sure Trump won't reverse that decision. I think it will come to the 90 days. If it's not finalized, Trump will turn around and say, oh, we'll extend it for another 60 days or 90 days, just like he is doing with the TikTok situation. He just continues to extend it so they don't have to deal with it. There's many other countries that have pushed back against these American tariffs, and surprisingly, even one of America's closest allies, Japan, have pushed back and said, you know, this is not happening. You're not imposing these tariffs. So they're in a bit of a stalemate as well. This business about Trump saying that, oh, you know, all these countries are coming wanting to do deals with us. It doesn't seem that they've done deals with actually many countries as well so far. The only country I know they've done a deal with is the UK, and that's only a framework deal, and it's neither here nor there. You know, the UK still has tariffs on a number of American products. I mean, I think if Trump keeps this tariff war up, he's going to end up isolating the US. I think soon, you know, you've still got like 60 to 70% of the goods shipping from China to the US, even with the 30% tariff. So over the next, you know, 3 to 6 months, you're going to start seeing that feed through to the US economy, and that will obviously stoke inflation. The dollar's under a lot of pressure. Bond yield rates are pretty high. Very few foreign investors want to buy US bonds, US government treasuries, and you know, they have a lot, as I've said in previous videos, they have a lot to refinance this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops. I mean, Trump, in my mind, is a bit of a showman. Every time he's asked a question, oh yeah, everything's going well, everything's going well, everything's going well. But you never really get any concrete, hard evidence of any of these great deals that have been done or the results. But anyway, let's keep an eye on it. I'll try and get another video up before I leave the UK and see if we can you know, discuss it anymore. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I always like reading the comments. I'll respond to as many as I can, but sometimes it's a time issue. But do leave the comment down below. But anyway, from here in the UK, for now, take care.